What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. We're going back to some old school content today. The MLS news hasn't really been buzzing as of late, which means we gotta go find some more things to do for you. And one of the things we recognize is we have just simply not yelled at each other enough. Just simply, it has been way too amicable, way too kind. So to fix that, we've got a top 10 for you, and we are listing our individual top 10 MLS strikers of all time. So, as I always do, I will give you the forewarning before you get into the episode. There will be two lists here. There will be the correct list, and there will be Connor's list. You can pick and choose which ones you'd like to listen to. Speaking of which, Connor's here. Connor, how you doing?
Thank you for the introduction after taking a shot at me and then introducing me. I appreciate that.
What, you think I'm going to give you a chance to defend yourself? Get out of here.
Yeah, I do. Well, I think you would.
Well,
I thought you were a stand-up guy, but I guess
you're
not.
out of your mind. How you doing? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
Good. You know, that's the reason I don't introduce you anymore, because I ask you, how you doing? And you don't even answer me anymore. So, like, what's the point?
No, usually I'm just continuing the conversation, continuing the flow of conversation.
Well, see, I'm trying to make it as nice as we can before we get into this, because I know you're going to have some dumb things to say. So
Probably.
I got to
Probably
be,
dumb to many people.
yeah, I got to be real nice about things. Before we jump into any list, we always have to talk about our scarf of the week. I've got a new one I haven't brought out yet, so I'll let you go first.
All right. That works. I'd rather not go after the new scarf. But we're talking about best strikers. There is a team that's had a few of them, and that would be the Quakes. So I'm bringing out my San Jose scarf.
So as people who have heard this series before now, this is really a top 9, because there's always one person who's the clear number one in these sorts of things, and that's what my scarf represents. It is a Red Bull scarf, which means we are obviously putting number 1 together as a unit, as a podcast team. Tom Barlow, thank you very much.
I'm here for that. I'll sign off on that.
So this scarf actually comes from a fellow Red Bull fan. He was doing a spring cleaning of sorts and had a bunch of scarves that he didn't need anymore, didn't want anymore, whatever it may be. And he was kind enough to send them our way to add to the scarf wall. So for the first time in DP pod history, I've got the season ticket holder New York Red Bull scarf. One of these days, I'm going to have one of my own that's like actually my season tickets, but I need to like leave. But one of the things it's upside down. But one of the things I really like about this is in the checkered pattern on the back, it's got the year of the season ticket. So it's this one was 2013, which was our first Shield win. So super cool. Again, little things like that we're scarf collectors. I am. I would consider Connor one too, but to be able to add things like that you can't just go pick up at a store is really nice. So Chris, I want to thank you again for your hospitality and your ability to share these scarves with us, because we love them, and I think everybody else will enjoy them too.
Yeah. I just realized if we are shouting out our Lord and Savior Tom Barlow, I do have my Chicago scarf right next to me.
Way up the fire.
So now the full Tom Barlow homage has been paid.
I absolutely love the fact that in the very first game he missed a breakaway to win the game, and everybody in Chicagoland felt my pain for the last 5 years. Like, welcome to my world, buddy.
That times 50 more times, and you'll get to the Red Bull level.
Get there. All right.
You're right.
No, I'm just dying, as one does when they work in a highly scientific lab.
Well, I'm dying to hear what your criteria was for your top 10 list.
Man, it sucks. I really wanted to cut that out, and now I have to keep it in for that transition. So thanks. All right.
That's fine. We can still cut it out.
No, it's a great transition, so we'll keep it. You want to talk criteria? Here is where I went with we're both numbers people. For those of you who don't know, we've got an accountant and an engineer sitting in a room, and that always leads to conversations about statistics. But I do have some vibe picks in there, so no stress. But essentially what I did was I went and looked. I took details off of Transfer Market because the FB Ref didn't give me a lot of the in-depth stuff I was looking for. So my big focus points were goals per appearance was a 1.5 times multiplier. Points from awards. So if you won an MVP, you got 3 points in my calculations. If you were a Golden Boot winner, you got 2. And if you were in an all-star team, you got 1. The sum of those points and then your standings in ranking against the other. I think I left it off to 30 or so. Yeah, 29 or 30 were my short list. So from there, I multiplied that ranking by 1.7. And then my last big one was goals per 90. Goals per 90 minutes was my times 2. And then I also factored in playoff goals and playoff assists because clutch matters. I did get data from every single eligible striker or second forward as per Transfer Market. And I cut it off at 20 goals just to see where we were at. And then I took away anybody who had under 0.5 goals per 90 and anybody who had under I think the cutoff was 190, 190s, 100, your total minutes divided by 90. If it was less than 100 for most of them, there were some outliers who were included. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. The other thing wasn't 90s. It was just straight up appearances. So did you have over 100 appearances at any point? And that's where I did my cutoff. That was a really complicated way to say anybody with 100 appearances and more than 0.5 goals per 90 was considered and then averaged out.
I could tell we sound like such numbers nerds doing this because mine's going to sound basically similar to yours, but different enough that it's worth explaining. So I looked at, I think, a lot of the same criteria and some different criteria as well. I looked at minutes, goals per 90, playoff goals, assists per 90. I looked at any transfer moves they made following their time in MLS.
Ooh.
How much the fees were across like all of their moves post MLS. And I want to specify, I looked at it. I only counted it if it was post MLS. Whatever they did pre MLS didn't count for my rankings. Doesn't really matter for an MLS ranking. You get the MLS tag once you've been to MLS. So whatever, let me pick someone. Whatever Robbie Keane did before he came to MLS, irrelevant for this rankings. I looked at individual awards, team awards, and then the last thing was national team appearances. And I weighted each thing differently. Goals and goals per 90 were my top. Obviously, it's a bit self-explanatory. We're talking about strikers. Their job is to score goals. So that was my highest weighted categories. But I have different weightings for different categories. But I can explain those a bit more as we kind of like go through each of the players. But it was a tough list to make, that's for sure. There are so many good strikers. There's going to be some that didn't make the list at all that are probably like top 5 for other people. So this is going to be a controversial one, I'm sure.
Yeah, and for those of you wondering, no, Connor has not seen the color of grass in the last 4 months because all he does is look at these stats.
I made my stats. I made my points columns green so that it mimics the color of grass.
You're a dweeb.
That's the closest thing I'll get to seeing grass.
You're such a dweeb. All right, well then I will ask you then to continue on with your little rant here and give me some of your honorable mentions, players who were close but not close enough.
So there were a bunch of players that were really close, like within a point of like 8th place. There were 4 strikers that didn't make the list. So I'll give them my honorable mentions. And like I said, it is super tight. Any of these guys could have been easily in the list. But the ones that just missed out for me were Ante Razov, Roy Lassiter, Josie Altidore, and Sebastian Giovinco.
Couple of good names on there.
A lot of good names on there for sure.
I think we're gonna have some things to yell about.
Yeah, I'm sure. I wasn't expecting to go through this without any yelling.
Yeah, so one of the caveats that I had was 100 appearances, right? So one of my one of my players ranked really well in terms of the categories that I had, but the appearances, I couldn't put him in the top 10 because he was here for 2 years. And that's Stern John from Columbus. If I just kept him in, he would have been even with my number 2 ranking. But because he had such a quick stint, and this is very similar to somebody like Zlatan Ibrahimovic as well, somebody who had 2 seasons, blew it up, and then bounced. Like, in that moment, yeah, probably one of the best the league's ever seen and whatever. But if we're talking all time, the impact on the league, I don't think was the same as somebody who might have done it over a long period of time. And the other one that I have is he who is forever cursed in the heart of Metro fans, and that is Jaime Moreno. Jaime just missed out, but mainly because he's got 133 goals in his career, but he did it over 340 appearances. So his goals per 90 and his goals per appearance brought him down in that ranking. And he also, to my knowledge, never won he had a bunch of appearances in the All-Star game, for example. However, he won the Golden Boot once and never won an MVP. And then his All-Star rating was just what kept him around. So that is my other honorable mention. The others will be self-explanatory.
My heart is hurting over the fact that Jaime Moreno did not make the top 10.
Never,
I think that is
there
wild.
was never going to be a shot.
I think there was some biased animosity in there towards Jaime Moreno because that was disrespectful to his legacy in MLS.
Do you see that? I'm looking for who asked because I didn't ask.
The whole point of this episode is that
I don't know if you asked.
It is always asked.
But here's the problem: is like your opinions are like so minimally weighted in this conversation that it just like it doesn't matter.
Oh boy, this is gonna be a fun episode.
All right, hit me with your number 10.
All right, so I get the feeling that based on your listing, you're probably not going to have this guy in your list. But my number 10 is Jeff Cunningham. 134 goals scored is number 4, I believe, on the all-time list. Yes, it is across a lot of minutes, but I did take into account goals per 90, which he was about averaging, I guess maybe a little bit above average. Like he was pretty solid. 0.52 per 90 is what I calculated. 23,000 minutes. I did give him some points for the fact that he was in the league and consistently being played. It hurt him a bit that he didn't have too many playoff goals. Only 5 is what I saw. So that was a bit low. It hurt his rating a bit. And assists, he was actually really strong in. 52 assists was pretty high. I mean, everybody's numbers got skewed kind of by one person, but we'll cover him later. But his assist numbers were pretty solid. In terms of outside of MLS, he went to I think the Guatemalan division at one point. So I don't think I ended up giving any points for that one. And then individual awards, I believe I saw 1 Golden Boot and 3 MLS Best 11s. So about little less than average points there. Not too much in terms of team awards won. Only 1 Supporter Shield and 1 US Open Cup. And didn't get much into the national team, only 15 appearances, which hurt his ranking as well. So I think his ranking was strongly boosted by the fact that he is number 4 on the all-time scoring charts. But there were a lot of other factors that kind of bumped him down from the number 4 spot if you were to just assume he goes into there to begin with.
Jeff just missed my list. So as you mentioned, you mentioned assists and goals. I didn't keep those in my rankings. I only did the playoff ones. But yeah, what hurt him the most was goals per appearance, goals per 90, right? His award points were okay. I think he had 2-time Golden Boot winner, 2-time All-Star. If he had made the All-Star game a couple more times, I think he bounces up my ratings and probably sneaks into that number 10 spot. So that's all right there. Mine is going to be controversial, my number 10.
Uh-oh.
At number 10, the leading goal scorer in MLS history, Chris Wondolowski. And here's why. Chris Wondolowski was a phenomenal MLS striker who never made the playoffs. He never got playoff goals. He never did it when it counted. If we're talking pure technical ability and goal scoring ability, Chris Wondolowski as a tap-in merchant, as a player whose movement in the box is something that I have used to teach strikers how to get open while we're cutting down the line. Like, this dude is unbelievable, which is why he's in my top 10, because based on the calculate, I told you I had some vibe picks in here. He got to number 10 because originally, based off of the numbers, he missed. But here's what I'll tell you. If we're, in my opinion, this list is the best of all time across playoffs, across the guys who get it done in crunch time, across all of them. He and you can argue about the players that were around him. That's fine. You can definitely bring that up and say that it's a team game, whatever. But if he's not getting it done in the playoffs, he's just not. I can't put him higher than 10. I had to get him in the top 10 because he is such a good goal scorer, but I can't get him higher than 10.
Yeah, it sounds like you're putting a lot of eggs in that playoff basket. But what I will say in his defense, he is the main, if he is a huge, if not the main reason that his teams won 2 Supporter Shield. So you can say what you want about him in MLS Cup, but that man absolutely carried his teams to 2 Supporter Shields.
Well,
So,
and I definitely brought that into consideration, by the way, because of his Golden Boot and his MVPs. That brought his rating up in terms of the award points, right? The Golden Boot, you're right, it helped them to a Supporter Shield, and I took that into account, right? I didn't double it up like I'm guessing you did. If you're talking about these awards and the team awards and the individual awards, that would be doubling it up. I took it for what it was and saying, yes, he had good individual numbers, but it was never enough to get them over the line.
you're entitled to your wrong opinion. I'll
Yeah,
leave it at that.
don't come at me like that.
I won't. The comments will come for you. Send this out to the San Jose fans. All right. Should we jump into number 9 then?
Go right ahead.
All right. So, number 9 for me is probably also going to need a little bit of explaining, but I have gone for Clint Dempsey at number 9.
What?
72 goals scored was the lowest out of anybody in my top 10. But the area where he gained a lot of traction compared to everybody else is the fact that I looked at the transfer moves that he made and the fees that he commanded in those moves, which I don't want to knock him for that because he started in MLS, and to make those types of moves in the era that he did it was huge. It was big time. He was moving to the Premier League and decent Premier League teams. He started with Bohm, who I'm not a Premier League expert during that era, but I think they were probably around mid-table during that time. And then he ultimately got a move to Tottenham, which I think only lasted a year, but that was a top 5 team during that season. If we had a striker at a top 5 Premier League club right now in the USMNT mix, people would lose their minds. They would go nuts. That dude would be on every team, every person's USMNT depth chart. He would be number 1. No questions about it. So I want to give that the proper credit that it deserves. So that boosted him a lot ahead of some other people. Honestly, his numbers were good compared to everybody else. They were a little bit worse, to be honest. His goals were definitely lower. Like I said, it was the lowest out of everybody that made the top 10 for me. Playoff goals was okay, a little bit low, honestly. Assists was decent. His awards were okay. They weren't too, honestly, not too great in terms of MLS. He 2-time MLS Best 11, 4-time All-Star, 1 MLS Cup, 1 Supporter Shield, 1 US Open Cup. Another big boost for him, his impact in the national team. 141 appearances in the national team was another big boost for him. So I think he had good enough numbers across the board where that transfer history that he had plus the national team impact that he had was enough to boost him in there. And like I said, 8 through what is that, 14? 8 through 14 for me were all separated by a point. So he could have just as easily dropped all the way down to 14th in my list. But I think because I looked at the transfer impact, that's going to make him higher on my list than other people who won't look at that.
The reason that we don't have that, because he didn't even make my short list, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, honestly.
Yeah, he wasn't in the top 28, 29 that I had. If I had considered outside transfers, national team, all that sort of stuff, for sure. Definitely he's going to be one of those guys up there. But for me, this is a list about the best MLS strikers, not the best players who had careers that played in MLS. Do you know what I mean? Not like I'm not picking a Gio dos Santos, right? Because he went in and he was a Mexican national team star and he was great in Liga MX and he was okay here, right? Like that to me doesn't explain the top strikers in MLS. But that's an opinion. It's a
Well,
correct opinion, and yours is not, but it's an opinion.
I'm not necessarily taking into account what he was able to accomplish overseas. Like I don't really care about his numbers there. I'm focused numbers wise on just what he was able to do in MLS. But I think his impact on the league as a striker was huge in the fact that he was able to get that move at a time when it was just not that common. It was not commonplace, except outside of maybe the goalkeeper position, which we had a number of goalkeepers go out. But at the striker spot, it was really not that common to see a guy kind of like come through the system and move on and see so much success overseas and command nearly 19 million euros in fees over his career, which was like the second highest on this entire list of everybody that I had that made moves post MLS. So I wanted to give credit to that because I think that has an effect on the league, considering he started with MLS and now has that MLS tag as he's going to move and be successful in Europe.
I mean, at that point, let's put John Duran and Ricardo Pepi in there, right?
It's still too well. Their numbers, I didn't only consider that. Like I looked at the numbers as well. Their numbers wouldn't be, first of all, they wouldn't have even had enough numbers to qualify, but their numbers wouldn't be
I
strong
just
enough on
disagree with
numbers.
the weight that you've put upon moves out. I don't have a problem that you factored it in, but I think you've weighted it too much.
I don't think I only put 3 total points on foreign moves, whereas like goals I put 10 and goals per 90 I put 10. So clearly like his other stats were strong enough that this was just kind of like the cherry on top that was able to bump him up.
Okay. My number 9 is somebody that you had just missing out, and it's Roy Lassiter. Roy Lassiter, to me, fit really well in goals per appearance. His goals per 90 were mid range. Didn't have a ton of points from awards. I think it was, he didn't have the other awards that the people above him had, if that makes sense, right? So 1 Golden Boot, 3 All-Star appearances, right? The people above them had multiple Golden Boots, a couple of MVPs, more than 3 All-Star games. Like that brought him down a little bit on my list, but the thing that kept him high, 4th in playoff goals. So going back to his data here, his playoff goals, 13 over his time in MLS, was only bested by 4 other players. So that sort of dominance to me is worthy of a top 10 spot here. And and here's the other thing. I believe it's evident that he was such a dominant one because when we look at some of the trivias that we do in terms of MLS history, he's always an answer when we're doing some of the top scorers and things like that. So maybe a forgotten name, even though his son is now playing in the league, but his impact was really, really impressive to me. So I think that's not too bad of a spot for him. I mean, you had him out, I had him just in.
Yeah, I'm not going to complain about that.
Cool. Do I have to complain about number 8? We might.
Oh, yes, you do.
If you put BWP at 8, I'm gonna be mad at you.
Guess who I put at number 8?
I'm gonna be mad at you.
I put BWP at number 8.
I'm actually not that mad. That's okay.
No question, he's a top 10 striker. And as much as I want to put him lower just to get you riled up and get you angry, because that would be for a great opening clip and all that stuff. Like he's unquestionably in the top 10. Like if he wasn't, I'd have to switch things around and make sure that he was, because he just legitimately is a top 10 striker. He's 114 goals, which is like maybe like top 10, something like that. His goals per 90 was really good, especially for like the amount of minutes that he has, 16,000 minutes. Like a lot of the guys who have really strong goals per 90 have like sub 13,000 minutes. And for BWP to have a strong goals per 90 at 16,000 minutes is a testament to how good he was here. 9 playoff goals was pretty solid. It's a bit lower than some of the top guys, but I don't think it necessarily hurt him in that regard. 28 assists was pretty strong as well. That wasn't too bad, especially comparatively to some of the others, but at the same time, there were a number of people that had more than him in that regard. Personal awards was, I'd say, about average. 2 Golden Boots, two MLS Best 11s, 2 All-Stars. I think the thing that hurt him is I think almost everybody I have ahead of him has an MVP, which I think is a huge award to win.
Mhm.
3 supporter shields is massive. 1 Campiones Cup as well, just to tack in there. I think the thing, and this is where it's going to differ on everybody's criteria, the thing that hurt him the most in my ranking, and the thing that would have jumped him up probably at least into the 2 spots if he had some stats here, is the fact that he had no national team appearances. And I understand that he's with England. It's not much he can really do in that regard. Like, that's kind of a tough spot to be in, but I'm not gonna like it was one of my criteria and he had 0 appearances. So that hurt him. I think I did the math, and if he had like 30 national team appearances, he would have jumped up to 6 in my list. So he's close. And I think if I weighted things a little bit differently, he would probably be at that 6th spot. But because of the way I weighted it, he dropped a little bit lower. I think mainly because of the national team stuff.
And again, that's one of the reasons why I think your stress on that stat is a little bit, I don't want to say unfair, but it's just, I think it's
It is. I understand that because
I
you
think
can
it
have someone.
stresses it a little bit because and that's the reason I didn't include stuff like that, by the way, because that to me was such a defining point of like Sebastian Giovinco, for example, right? Like I know you have him out, and it's probably because he didn't make many, if at all, national team appearances, right? That to me isn't really a fair. Whereas now, and again, I'm just gonna throw some random things out there, right? Like Josef Martinez playing 100 times for Venezuela while BW he can't get into England. Is that the same comparison? I don't think so. I think that's a stretch.
Well, that's why I have a lower, what is it, like a risk weighting on it. Like it's not weighted nearly as much for that reason. And you can like that's totally fair criticism to say because that's completely valid. There are people who are gonna boost up in that stat because they are playing for a weaker national team and can get in there more often versus guys who are in strong ones and really can't get a ton of appearances. But like I said, it's a bit lower on the ranking, so on the weighting. So there's other factors at play other than just the national team part of it. Like I gave it a 3 comparatively to like goals and goals per 90, where I gave it 10. So the most you can get in that category is 10. The most you can get in the national team is 3. So it's a bit lower. I could 100% see the argument for changing it and making it even lower, and I would totally be open to that. But I don't want to completely disregard it either because I think there's some validity to guys who can consistently get in and get involved with their national team.
Okay. My number 8, and you will have to just hear me out. My number 8 is the original Captain America, Landon Donovan, at number 8. And here's why. And here's why. You have to listen to me. You have to listen to me.
I'm listening, but I'm hurting.
He spent so much of his time as a winger and a midfielder. He spent so much of it. I know he's labeled as a second striker. I know he is. But if you remember the times that he played, he was a wide player, which is why, and I know you referenced him before about being skewed in the assist numbers, which is why his assist numbers are skewed out of the wazoo. I am not denying that even when he played as a striker, he was a top 10 in this league. But the fact that he played, my guess, most of his career wide impacts that rating. You can cry. You can argue with a wall. I don't really care. But I cannot in good faith, and I get it. He's got the most playoff goals, the most playoff assists. He's got the most awards. Like I get it. And he's gotten for your rating, right? He's got the moves overseas. He's got the national team appearances. I get it. But he did all of that as a wide player for so long. And I almost didn't even include him on my list because I know he's listed as a second striker on Transfer Market. But just knowing him, I know he's a wide. And he was great as a wide player. And then he moved in. And I'm not saying he never played striker. Like this is a ridiculous list. Like I know he balanced it out relatively well. But to me, when I think Landon Donovan, I think Landon Donovan on the wing, not as a striker.
I don't think like we could have the debate at the start to whether or not to include him. And I know we spoke about it. We said that we were going to include him. So I don't think it's fair to knock him because he had time out on the wing. And like, I don't want to go too far into it because spoiler alert, I'm going to cover him later, but I think there's so many other factors, even outside of him skewing the assist numbers or whatever, that helped boost him way up. I mean, you went through like a number of it. Like you named off a bunch of things where he just absolutely wiped the floor with everybody. But
Let me put it this way. if I have the ability to use whoscored.com, which is what I usually use to update lists like this, the first thing I do is I only select data from when they played in that position. He would not be on this list if that was the case. I promise you he would. And because of that, I had to knock him down.
I mean, I'm looking at his stuff right now. He had 46 appearances as a center forward. He had 25 as a second striker. So, I mean, he had majority of his time, according to Transfer Market. I'm not an expert on this. You can make your eyewitness testimony as much as you'd like, but Transfer Market says he spent most of his time in the middle of the field in an attacking striker-ish position. I know he wasn't an out-and-out number 9. But
45 and 25?
Transfer Market says 46 at center forward, 25 as second striker.
He made 340 appearances in his career. Where else did he play? Out wide.
They're not okay. Then I don't know where they're pulling these numbers from, because out wide they only have 31 on the right wing and 22 on the left wing.
And maybe he played as a number 10, which is fine, but we didn't include players like Hani Mukhtar, who we consider as a striker for some of our drafts this year.
They're saying number 10, he was only there for 17 appearances. I don't know where these numbers are coming from, but this is what they're grabbing. Maybe it's because positionally they only have a certain number of years of data.
Well, and fine, right? But that's my point. If during a certain number of year of data, everything spread that evenly, where it's 45, 25, 25, 30, you can't call him like just an out-and-out striker, where if you extrapolated that out to 340 appearances, it's going to be spread even. Like, you know, he could have dropped into a 10 role. He could have played out wide. He could have played as a.
Yeah, we shouldn't have put him on the list. We talked about this ahead of time. We said we were going to base it off what Transfer Market says is the main position. So that's
You're
what
right.
we did.
You're right. And then what I told you is I took a vibe check. Right, I use my ball knowledge to take a vibe check.
Your vibes are awful. You're just knocking him for the fact that he.
I'm trying to speak into your hip new lingo that you've been using recently. I tried to pass the vibe check with some of my.
You
ball
failed
knowledge.
The vibe check.
No,
you failed it.
I'm not. This is in no way talking about Landon Donovan not being an elite player. This is the fact that we are talking about strikers, and Landon Donovan, when he was a striker, was great. He was nearly elite. You could probably argue, but he wasn't an out-and-out 9. So I'm not going.
I don't disagree. I do not disagree. He's definitely not an out-and-out 9. He's a guy that kind of falls into that like Giovinco kind of thing, where it's like he was a little bit deeper, but he wasn't exactly a 10 either. And so I don't think like it hurts him to look at his legacy in total if you're splitting him into all these different positions, because then you're going to look at him on the wings and you're going to be like, all right, well, there's a bunch of numbers that we're not counting because he was playing as a center forward or a second striker. So I feel like you just need to pick a position, classify him as it, whether it's perfect or not, and then just look at his career in totality.
Well, and here's the thing. Like, if he was playing just 9, false 9, 10 all day long, right? And we're going to have that conversation later. It's going to come up again. I promise you.
I know.
But the fact that he was wide takes away from this. You can bring an outside player in, but the striker at the 9, like, you're not taking Christian Benteke and playing him as a winger. You're just not. So that hybrid is worth an argument at the very least.
There's other 9s though you could take and put on the wing. You could take like a Tati Castellanos and put him out on the wing, but Tati's a 9. Like, we wouldn't have an argument that Tati is a striker. And I'm sure he was on your statistics list.
Oh yeah, no, I had him in there. He didn't make my short. He did make my short list. Look at that.
I'm not saying that every striker on here can go play on the wings. I would say majority probably can't, to your point. But there are guys that I think could move out on the wing that would be number 9s. I'm not even necessarily saying that Landon is a number 9. I'm not necessarily arguing that he should or should not be on this list, but that was a discussion we had before the episode. And now you're docking him for something that we spoke about ahead of time. Because like of course the listing would change if we had to like just look at his striker numbers. But then at the same time, it's like, how do you look at stuff like his awards? Are you going to like only look at the awards in the seasons where he played majority striker? Like that just feels excessive. Like at some point we just got to look at him as his career.
Well, at that point, then we're not arguing top strikers. We're arguing top players, top goal scorers, right? If we were talking top goal scorers, completely different story. And here's where I'll leave this because we can go on to this forever. Our favorite analysis tool, FIFA cards, starts him off in FIFA 10 as a striker. FIFA 11, he's a right mid. FIFA 12, he's a striker. FIFA 13, he's a right mid and a striker. FIFA 14, he's a left mid and a striker. FIFA 14 World Cup, he's a striker. FIFA 15, he's a left mid. FIFA 16, he's an icon at a striker. FIFA 23, when they bring him back, he's a right mid and a striker. And then in his card this year, they have him in the ability to play as a striker, as a right mid, as a left mid, and as a cam.
I
That
heard
to me,
striker on almost every single card.
clearly you didn't because you're not listening. You're selective hearing, right? Anyways, let us know what you think in the comments. Should Landon Donovan be considered a striker? Should he, if he is considered a striker, do we put him that low? If he isn't a striker, should he even be on the list at all? Where do you stand?
What would you like? What position would you classify him as then?
He's a winger. Like, if I have to pick where he's going to play in a team, I'm playing him out wide. Now, am I going to give him the freedom to come inside and create things as like a false, like an offset, attacking player? Sure, because he's got that ability. But I would play him wide first. Mainly just simply because that's where I see him as the most effective player.
All right, we'll just leave it to the comments and let them decide what they want to classify him as. Again, I have no problem with whether or not you want to classify him as a winger or a striker, but this is something we should have ironed out to begin with because now it's like skewing everything.
Wow.
Let me just get into my number 7 so that I can have some happiness in my life. Because number 7, I have put Josef Martinez because I needed to find a way to put him ahead of BWP, and I did.
Wow.
Josef has got 106 goals in 12,000 minutes. It is one of the best goals per 90 out of everybody on my list, which I don't know if I specified before, but I cut my list off at 50 goals. You needed 50 regular season goals in order to qualify for the list, and then I cut it off from there. Josef goals per 90, I think, was bested by maybe like 2 other people, and those people were in the league for like 2 years. Josef has been in the league for I don't even know how many years at this point, maybe 5 or 6, and he still has a 0.79 goals per 90. It is outrageous. The dude at his prime was arguably like one-off seasons from a striker, easily top 3 of all time, arguably even number 1 of all time. Like, he was elite. He was amazing. Some areas where he got knocked, playoff goals, only 5 so far. A few playoff appearances for Atlanta. Didn't make it last year with Miami. There's obviously still time for him to get more playoff goals and get more minutes and more goals and all that stuff with Montreal. But as of this moment, that hurt him. He definitely got knocked for that. 17 assists was also very low. So he did get knocked for that as well. What helped him a bit were the personal awards. 1 Golden Boot, 3-time Best 11, 2-time All-Star, and the biggest thing, winning MVP. I put a lot of weight on winning that award. I think it is a prestigious award to win, even if it is sometimes not to our agreement. Hani Mukhtar was robbed. In terms of team awards, definitely weaker. He got knocked there. MLS Cup was probably the biggest thing that he's won, followed by probably Leagues Cup, and then US Open Cup and a Campeones Cup. So not a lot in terms of team awards. He definitely got knocked there. And then in terms of national team appearances, he was honestly pretty average. He's got 66 for Venezuela, so he got some points in that regard, but honestly didn't get a ton. And I think that's what ultimately stopped him from jumping up to 6. That, and he's had no moves outside of MLS since he's been here. So his strong goal scoring numbers is really what boosted him high up my list. What he was able to do, and hopefully what he will still be able to do if he can kind of get back to that level in terms of like at his height, was insane. Like it was some of the best striker performances that we've seen in the league's history. So because of that, I got him at 7.
I'm gonna make this very simple. You are out of your mind.
Nope.
That's all I'm gonna say. You're out of your mind because I can't go on another rant that long. My number 7, based on calculations and vibes, David Villa. David Villa at number 7 was one of the ones it hurt me to have him a little low, even though he played for the worst team in the league, because he was so electric and so good in moments. But again, where he was hurt was his playoff goals and his playoff assists, his playoff goal contributions, right? In the same vein as Chris Wondolowski, if you aren't getting it done at the times when it matters, then you're good, right? But the best are successful when it counts. And again, you can argue that David Villa never made it into with a team that would have supported him at MLS Cup. I wouldn't disagree with you there. I think that he missed it out on the first year, and the second year they snuck in. And I think overall, David Villa playoff goals 3, 0 playoff assists, 77 goals. I mean, his goals per 90 were out of this world. I mean, that was one of the things that brought him higher up the list. I think he was third on that ranking. So, phenomenal numbers there. Like, the dude came in and he was great, but he was there for just a short amount of time, right? Like you mentioned, Josef Martinez doing something like that for so long. A lot of the people in my list are in that same kind of boat. And then again, his MVP brought him up a little bit higher than others as well, even though it was an absolutely fraudulent one that BWP or Question should have won. Probably Question for setting the freaking assist record or second in the assist, or whatever it may be. I think he's great. I think he definitely is a top 10 striker from this league's history. But I think that the lack of time that he had here is what kind of brought him lower down this list.
I think you've got Josef higher in your list, and you're not telling me
I
because
think you're out of your mind.
I can't see any box that David Villa is checking that Josef hasn't checked. But yeah, I think the time thing is kind of what bumped him a little bit lower on my list. He honestly wasn't like he's only a couple players off from the honorable mentions for me. But yeah, I mean, you said it. His goals per 90 was super strong. Playoff goals hurt him a ton for me. The fact that he didn't win any team awards when he was here either also hurt him for me. And then I think, yeah, just like you said, the time factor, he just wasn't here for very long. And I think that hurt him a little bit on mine too. But if he spent a little bit more time here, maybe won a trophy or two with the team, I think he would probably be in my conversation as well.
Oh yeah, he sticks around till they win MLS Cup. Yeah, he's a top 5, maybe a top 3. No doubt about it.
I don't know if I got that far, but he'd probably be in my list.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I know your top 3 is garbage because I'm looking at my top 3 and your top 3. Your top 3 is garbage.
You don't even know my top 3.
Yeah, but I can already tell based off of some of the things that you said that your top 3 is garbage.
You probably know who majority of my top 3 is.
I'd love to know your number 6. I don't really care about top 3 right now. I want to know your 6.
So I'm looking at my 6 right now, and I'm having a little bit of regrets on it. Makes me kind of want to reweight things and move things around, but I'm going to stick with it. And I am open to the argument if you want to hit me with the arguments on him being lower. But I did have Kei Kamara at 6.
Wow.
143 goals scored, is third all time right now. And considering he just signed for LAFC, I would think that he is probably going to pass Landon and go into second all time in terms of goals scored. I don't think that's something that should be overlooked. And I didn't count this as a factor, but I think it's more of a non-numbers factor. The fact that he's going to do this across 11 different MLS teams is incredible. He's playing in different systems with different teammates, and no matter where you put him, he's scoring goals. I think that's a testament. He has got nearly 30,000 minutes played. The guy is getting minutes because he's good. He's not just getting minutes because they need somebody to run around on the field. He's getting minutes because he can score. I mean, he's 39, I think, something around that now. And he was scoring plenty of goals for Chicago last season. He was one of their better goal scorers, a 39-year-old Kei Kamara. Like, I think there's a lot of things that hurt him. Like 5 playoff goals for a guy with 30,000 minutes is insane. That definitely hurt him. 45 assists was pretty solid. He got a little bit of points for foreign transfers. He had some time with Norwich, Middlesbrough, and a little bit of time in Finland. He didn't get a ton there, but he got a little bit of points there. 1.24 million euros in transfer fees. That didn't really get him many points either, but still a little bit. Awards, honestly, is kind of where it hurt him the most, I think. I think he had 1 Golden Boot and 1 MLS Best 11 and 2-time All-Star. But in terms of team awards, I think he's only got 1 U.S. Open Cup, which hurt him a lot. 39 appearances with the national team also hurt him a bit. And that's all my criteria. So I think his goals is really what carried him big time in mind. The fact that he's been here for so long and the fact that he's just scored so many goals. And I understand the argument. And like I said, that's why I'm willing to have that argument about moving him lower, is the fact that, yes, he has so many goals because he played 30,000 minutes. And I understand that. But at the end of the day, I'm looking at strikers who can score goals, and the guy has scored goals everywhere he's been. So I wanted to give him some credit. I just may have given him a little too much credit now that
Yeah,
I look at it again.
that's high for me. I mean, he didn't make. I actually had to bring him into the conversation. So when I did all of my separation, the one thing I did, and I went back to fix, was I included anybody who scored over 100 goals, because that, I think, does play a weight into it. Now, he didn't make my original short list, and I mean, he was second to last on my list in terms of my weighting. Now, again, this would have been one of the vibe things where I would have moved him closer to honorable mention status because of just how dominant he's been, like, over such a long time. I don't disagree with you on there. I would absolutely hear a top 10 argument for him. I don't disagree that you could make that argument for him, because that sort of longevity is unheard of. And, like, Sporting KC, Kei Kamara was just different, dude. That dude was unbelievable. I just wonder, and like you mentioned, the 5 playoff goals, a little tough. He, if I remember correctly,
his per 90 is not good either.
when
I look at what you're focusing on and the stats that he has, I can 100% see why he's low on your list, because he's poor in per 90 and he has like no playoff goals.
Right, no MVP, no Golden Boot, only 3
Yeah.
All-Star games. Like, the qualities we are looking for in this list, he just doesn't check. Now, is that to say he's terrible and shouldn't be even spoken about? No. He is an elite goal scorer who knows how to get it done anywhere he goes, like you mentioned. Just for me, he's closer to honorable mention than anything else. But that's, again, I'm okay with you having him in your top 10. Is 6 high? Yeah, I think so.
I don't disagree. When I look at it back again, I think it's a little high.
So my number 6 is somebody that we've already spoken about. Can you guess who it is?
Is it Josef?
It's not.
Is it BWP?
You're insane. It's BWP at number 6. Again, so we've talked about David Villa's fraudulent MVP vote, and if BWP won that MVP, I think he's a top 5, if not higher. 2 Golden Boots. You talk about Chris Wondolowski being single-handedly one of the reasons his team won, Supporter Shield. Hold your beer. Here's BWP, who dragged us along to where he needed to be, right? Did he have more help than, say, Chris Wondolowski did, in the form of, I don't know, this guy Thierry Henry and Time Cahill? Yeah, those sort of guys, sure. But for me, like, he was just overall right in the middle of this top, or not right in the middle, like right in the average of the top 10. So playoff goals, we're looking at 8th overall out of 25 was my, like, short list, it looks like. Playoff assists, we're looking at number 6 overall in that sense. And then what really, really helped him out was goals per appearance, goals per 90. One of the fastest players to get to 100 goals in MLS history is nothing to sneeze at, if you will. 114 total goals in 181 appearances. I mean, he's pushing a goals per 90 of 0.63, which is up there in this comparison that we are making. So outside of that, there was also his awards points, right? So not like out of this world amazing in terms of winning everything. Again, if he had won an MVP, I think it's a different conversation. But 2 Golden Boots, 2 All-Star games brings him into that kind of mid-range where he's like, he's up there. He's 100% one of the top guys in this list, no doubt about it. But he just doesn't get higher for me because he missed out on some of, like you mentioned, some of those key awards. And again, whether MLS robbed us because Daddy Don wanted to give his star boy some more attention, the world may never know. I know, but the world may never know.
I'm honestly impressed. We had BWP in very similar spots.
Yeah,
I was very close to having him at 6, and honestly should have him at 7, because I think I'd probably bump Kai down to like 8, move Josef and BWP up. So we're right on the same page.
I just don't think that I can get him higher based off of some of the stuff that he hasn't won compared to the people ahead of him, right? Like, that's all it is. It's not necessarily a him thing. It's the people above him are just better.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of people above him, talk to me about your number 5.
Well, we almost talked about my number 5 because it is Carlos Ruiz. Carlos Ruiz has 89 goals in MLS, which in terms of my list, he was one of 3 people that was actually below 100 goals that made my top 10. And one of the key reasons is a point you touched upon. The dude knows how to get it done in the playoffs. 16 playoff goals, a lot of which of those were in that early 2000s LA Galaxy playoff run. My goodness, we covered it in MLS history. If you want to hear about it, go check out that episode. I think the stuff that honestly ended up hurting him is just the fact that he wasn't here for super long. I mean, he had good minutes. I don't want to caveat that by saying like making it sound like he wasn't here a ton, but there are a lot of guys around him in this list who have like double the amount of minutes that he had in this league, and I understand that that gives them a huge advantage in terms of getting goals in this league. But even his per 90 was about middle of the pack, I think, for me. 0.57, so it was good, but not something that was going to jump him up the page a ton. 17 assists really did nothing for him. Had a couple of like stints in Mexico and one in Greece since he was in MLS, which really didn't get him much there. No transfer fees. His awards were definitely a help for him. An MVP, 2 Golden Boots, as you were talking about, 1 MLS Best 11, 3-time All-Star. Those were good boosts for him. Ultimately, the people ahead of him in my list had a bit more. That's what kind of boosted them a little bit ahead. In terms of team awards, 1 MLS Cup, 2 Supporter Shields, 1 US Open Cup. I'd say about middle of the pack, but again, same story of like people ahead of him just had a bit more, so they were able to jump up the list. He had a lot of national team appearances, and this is a situation where it's definitely a skewed statistic to look at because it's going to be a lot easier for him to get into the national team versus a BWP to get into the England national team. I understand that. And if I were to do it again, I'd probably look to change it up or just take it out fully. But it did end up benefiting him because he had 133 national team appearances. So certainly in some key metric areas, he really was one of the top guys. And I think that really helped him boost up to number 5 on my list. And I imagine you'll be talking about him shortly, is what I'm gathering. Maybe not at this pick, but probably shortly.
So shortly that I'm just not even going to wait. I'm going to dive right into it. Carlos Ruiz, number 5, baby.
Let's go. Yes, we agree on
Finally got
something.
one. And you know what? It wasn't at number 8 this time. It's always number 8 in our past ones, but now we bumped it up a little.
Yep.
And usually, like, our top 3 are pretty close, but like usually the lower ones, it's always 8. But yeah, Carlos Ruiz for me, we talked about it. Playoff goals, elite. Playoff assists, like dude gets it done when it matters. And the other one that helped him out were his awards, right? So his award points were off the charts. So 3 MVPs, 2 Golden Boots, 3 All-Star appearances. Back then, maybe it wasn't so difficult to make the All-Star team, right? Like 10 teams, not a lot of players, and a lot of the ones that he made were East versus West, so you're cutting it even slimmer at that point. But still, MVP and 2 Golden Boots in that time is next level stuff. And again, his impact on the 2000 run that LA made to get them their first ever cup, like that weighs on me. You know, his per 90 and his per appearances are okay, right? They're not like super elite, they're not super terrible, so that didn't hurt him or help him. It kept him kind of right in the middle of this pack. So number 5, I think, is a good spot for him. Well done, Mr. Wright. So
I'm
now,
glad we agree on something.
well, here's the problem. I'm looking at my top 4, and you've already knocked out 2 of them. So
I think we're gonna either be close or agree on one player, and then that's it. Because
I
you've
think we're gonna
talked about
agree on
3 out of the 4 of mine.
You know, that
Which
actually
will
makes
make this interesting.
that makes me feel a little bit better, at least that you're not like pulling somebody who I looked at and was like, absolutely not. So that's a good start. Give me 4.
4 for me was Robbie Keane. I've gone for the LA Galaxy, man. I think, and I'm just double checking, yes, he's the lowest amount of minutes out of anybody on my list. And I think genuinely that probably hurt him in terms of moving up higher. But within those minutes when he was here, he was elite. 83 goals in the 10,800 minutes. A 0.69 goals per 90 was probably top 10, but certainly very high. 9 playoff goals, which was pretty solid. I mean, considering the amount of time that he was here, like if you gave him more time while he was here, I'm sure that number is going to easily go into the double digits. Pretty solid striker in playoffs when he was here. Assists were pretty strong with 34. Certainly a lot of other guys had higher amounts, but it was strong enough that I kept him in the conversation. Awards was a huge one. 4 MLS Best 11s, 1 MVP, 1 All-Star, team awards. He had 3 MLS Cups, a Supporter Shield, and then another big boost for him. And again, it's have your debate on the statistic, but 146 appearances for the national team. He was a consistent starter for the national team. All of that ended up giving him the 4th highest score. He was very close with Carlos Ruiz for me, so I probably could be interchangeable with them being 4-5. But he was still a tier below the top 3 for me. And I think that's really coming down to the fact that he just wasn't here as long as the other guys. So he just wasn't able to kind of rack up those numbers as much as the other guys were.
So here's my problem with your international stat. My last problem with it. How many times in MLS did he play for Ireland? How many times did those appearances, like you're like, oh, I'm not worried about what they did before or after, right? But now you're talking about international appearances where he definitely made at least 100 of those before stepping foot in America, right? So that weighting, I think, is throwing you off a little. So
I'll keep it in mind for next time.
Yeah, you're damn right you will. Connor, I'm going to say a name here at number 4, and I'm going to have to ask you before I even say anything about it, because you said I've already talked about 3 of the 4 that are in your list, and you just mentioned the other one. Where's Taylor Twellman, Connor?
Oh, he was first guy outside of the honorable mentions.
Are you kidding?
No.
My goodness, you're actually dumb. Like, you don't have. I you know what? I do need to make your Excel sheet for you because you don't know what you're doing. So let's talk about it. Bloody hell! What does this come to? Anyways, 101 regular season goals in 167 90s played. That's 0.6 on the goals per 90. And if you're doing it in terms of appearances, it's 0.58 because they were pretty much all 90-minute appearances, give or take a few. So that puts him instantly in goals per 90. He is top 10. In goals per appearance, he is, do my math really quick, top 5, I believe, at least, maybe higher. My math really quick. Ooh, he's top 4. He's top 4. Then we go to what matters the most in this list for people with brains, and that is playoff success. Mr. Twellman, with 10 playoff goals, is 6th overall, 7th overall, give or take, on that list. That matters, right? Like that is important, and especially the way that he did it. He took, and yes, they didn't win it, but he took New England to the MLS Cup Finals like multiple times in a row. Assists are what they are. I don't really weigh too much into the assists there. But the last one was his awards, like the awards that he won: an MVP, 2 Golden Boots, if my numbers are correct, and 4 All-Star games. Like that right there tells you that he was a very, very good attacking player. When you put all of this together and compare it to the shortcomings of the people below, that is what gets him into a top 4 spot. I think the fact that you don't have him on here is a massive disservice. And I can already tell you where your shortcomings lie. Because it's like it'll probably be in international appearances, because I don't think he had a ton of those. Transfer moves for fees because he didn't get over to Preston North End. They shut us down, and number of times he said, "What are we doing on an international broadcast?" has knocked him down 70 points and made him miss your list. Am I close?
You're not terribly far off.
Yeah, I figured as much. Your dumb ratings has knocked you out of a top 4 spot.
I mean, top 4 to me is definitely way too high, but I think he is in the argument for top 10. The stuff that knocked him a little bit lower for me is 15,000 minutes was solid, but it was about like half of the top person.
Yeah, I was about to say, I figured that was also going to be something there where he had his career ended early. Like I figured that was coming too.
Yeah. As you mentioned, there was no time outside of MLS. Granted, that's not a huge weighting, but it didn't
say
help
that,
him.
but he missed out because of it. So you say it's not a huge weighting, but it is.
It's not the only thing. He had none of that. He had basically no team awards. He's won US Open Cup. That's it. That hurt him a lot too. He lost a lot of points in that regard.
The fact that he made it to 4 MLS Cups
he couldn't win it. You got to win.
He got there. How many times did Red Bull got there? Once.
It doesn't matter.
Bloody once.
You got to win it. There's no second place award. You want me to give the second place
the runners up medal? There is.
That's not making it into my team awards list.
Around their neck.
I'm not giving them runners up. You think they want to be known as being runners up? No, they want to be known as champions.
Trust me, I'm in Buffalo. I'm near enough to Buffalo where everybody reminds me of the time they went to 4 straight and didn't win. Somebody cares.
That's because Buffalo has nothing else. Yes, and as you mentioned, the national team thing also did not help him. He only had 30 appearances. Again, I would be willing to move things around, like redo it with different weightings, and he will probably move up for sure. But there were multiple factors in my list that bumped him down. I'm not saying he was far out. Like he was close to being in the top 10, but he just misses because of the fact that he just didn't have as much time as everybody else. No, like nothing outside of MLS and no team awards and no national team appearances really, or not a lot of national team appearances.
Think you're something else, Connor. That's all I'm going to say. All right, go ahead and give me your number 3.
All right, number 3 for me is Chris Wondolowski because I have a brain and I don't put the top goal scorer in MLS history at number 10.
Nope, you're out of your mind.
Doesn't matter if his goals per 90 is 0.5. The guy was able to do it across 30,000 minutes pretty consistently, surely more consistently than the others were able to do it on this list. And so, yeah, he goes really high up in my list for that. He's
so
20
if,
goals.
So if we're talking about like consistently playing goalkeepers who have gone forever, then Brad Guzan's a top 3 goalkeeper, isn't he?
He wasn't consistently doing that in MLS.
Oh, yeah. Like Chris Wondolowski was bagging goals every year.
Considering the fact that he has 2 golden boots, I'll say that he was doing a pretty good job of bagging goals every year.
Yeah, 2 golden boots in what, 2012 and 2014? Or earlier than that, maybe earlier.
2010 and 2012.
Yeah, that's right. So
he's bagging golden boots in the LA Galaxy Dynasty era. Hats off to that guy. 169 goals. You don't get 169 goals by not being a consistent goal scorer. The guy was scoring in all of these seasons. Per 90 is okay. It's not great. I know that's knocking him down your list. And then you crucified him for the playoff goals thing, which I agree. Definitely did not help him on my list. There's a reason he's number 3 on my list, and that's because he's terrible in the playoffs. 2 playoff goals when you've played nearly 30,000 minutes is insane. That's a crazy return. 41 assists was okay. It wasn't too great, wasn't too bad. Nothing outside of MLS. His individual awards were fantastic. 2 golden boots, an MVP, 3-time MLS Best 11, 5-time All-Star. Some of the best awards in terms of individuals on this list for me. He was fantastic, and he got the awards that he deserved for being fantastic. Team awards was okay. 2 MLS Cups, 2 Supporter Shields. Got him pretty decent points, but the guys ahead of him had a bit more in terms of the team awards. And then national team, again, was something where he got a bit more knocked because he had 35 national team appearances, whereas other guys had a lot more.
And how many points did he lose for Belgium? Oh, you didn't take that into account? Oh,
I should do a -1 immediately.
Your list is void. Your list is void. I'm done. Your list is void.
I didn't hear you mentioning Belgium in yours. I'm just saying.
Yeah, because I put him at 10. I didn't need to justify it. What do you mean?
Crazy. Guy puts the number 1 goal scorer in MLS history at number 10.
You're telling me that
the guy's 20 goals clear of the next closest. What? Am I telling you what?
You're hurting me. You're hurting my brain.
This isn't to say that like there's not more like talented goals like strikers. Like obviously there is. I'm not saying Chris Wondolowski is the 3rd most talented in history. However, there's talented guys that just didn't spend enough time in this league to get up to this level of where I have Wondolowski in my list.
Okay.
Tell me you're incorrect number 3.
My number 3, I can't believe that you left this guy off. And you didn't even give a good justification for it. Sebastian Giovinco is the 3rd best striker in the history of MLS. That dude came up and was on.
Oh, but Sebastian Giovinco's at number 10, so I can't consider him at the high of the list.
And he's not, by the way, because he's an offset 9. And this is where we will have this conversation. I told you it was coming back. If your argument was striker or offset 9 versus left wing, have at it. I would hear it all day long. All he did was go from the highest point in the triangle to letting Josie be the highest and him dropping off a little bit. That's all it was. So he counts for my list. And when we do that, now we go and talk about his success in his time here. So goals per appearance, goals per 90, great numbers. Awards, great numbers. 68 goals in 107 90s is a 6.34 goals per 90. 41 assists in that time is good too. But now we go to the playoffs where he scored 5 goals. which compared to a bunch of the other strikers is relatively successful, right? But now what really brought him up there was in his short time, the number of awards that he won: an MVP, one Golden Boot, and 4 All-Star games. It's unreal, right? In that time, that's like elite contributions. And I believe he was here long enough where we don't have to have the argument of like Stern John or Zlatan, where it's like, okay, they had a 0.88 goal per 90, but they only did it for 2 seasons, right? I think it's a like not even bringing him in the top 10, I think is brutal. I think not having him in the top 5 is a miss. I could hear arguments outside of top 3, some of them, but no, I think that you swung and missed on this one. I mean, everything that I have here, even weighted, is above 10th overall. That's impressive.
So, first of all, I think it sounds like you're doubling up your statistics by looking at per appearances and per 90.
Don't come at me, Mr. Individual and Team Awards with your double. Don't come at me for that.
Those are 2 different awards. You could be a good individual player and not have a lot of team awards, or vice versa. But the individual awards got more weighting for me than the team awards, because I can understand that you could just be carried by a good team. But the individual awards, that's your performance. Like, you're getting the award because of your performance. That's not because you have like the best team around you. I mean, it could have some effect, but I don't think it has enough of an effect where it just should be like regarded at the same level. Anyway, I mean, he's obviously in the conversation, hence why I mentioned him, but he played less than 10,000 minutes, which is what really like killed him on my list. And the fact that like he had 68 goals, which was a lot lower than everybody around him. And that's a product of the fact that he played less than 10,000 minutes here. And his per 90 was very good. Like, I think it was joint 6th best. But I mean, there's guys in my top 10 with more like thousands of more minutes who have a better goals per 90 than him. His assist levels were obviously very strong, but I think that's a product of, again, that conversation where he plays like basically some mix between a low 9 and a 10. And I think that benefits him in the assist regards. I didn't weight assists super heavily anyway.
I only included them in the playoffs, and that was just to see their impact, completely, right?
Yeah, I mean, his playoff numbers were not great. Again, the national team, he had 23 caps. He got pretty minimal points there. His individual awards were a good boost for him. His team awards probably, I didn't have weighting on the fact that they did a treble, where that's something where it's a bit more subjective and things that I could probably look to include in the future, because I look at it and I see 1 MLS Cup, 1 Supporters Shield, 3 Canadian championships, which on the surface of it looks pretty good. But when you consider the fact that they did 3 of them in 1 season, I feel like probably should be a boost. Probably something I would look into in the future. But I think it's just the fact that he just wasn't here long enough for me to jump him up the list. Like, talent-wise, he's top 10, no question for me. Probably top 5. But I consider longevity as part of it too. I'm not just going to disregard the guys that were able to do it across 10 to 15 seasons and consistently do it in this league. Like, if Giovinco stays, we can make the argument all we want that he's going to consistently keep up that level, but there's no guarantee that he does. He could have an injury, he can kind of fall off, and then in that case, he's racking up the minutes and not racking up the goals. It's going to skew his statistics and make it look worse.
I think if we're talking purely talent and ability from a striker, even if he's coming off the line and playing in between the lines, Giovinco is a top 10 striker in this league. And I think you're out of your mind if you don't agree with me.
I think talent-wise, he is a top 10, but I just think his impact as a top 10 striker just missed out for me because he just wasn't here that long.
This is why we don't pay you to think. Give me your number 2. Let's see if we can wrap this up.
All right. Number 2 for me is Jaime Moreno.
Ew.
133 goals. Top 5.
So we're just going over anybody who scored over 100 goals is going to be a top 3 player. So get me Giassi Zardes up there. Get me Giassi Zardes up there. Go ahead. Put him up there.
Giassi was way down my list.
Where was he?
He was way down my list. He wasn't even close to an honorable mention.
Yeah, me too.
I have multiple people with 100 goals that didn't make the list. That was not, but like, of course, I'm going to put the top goal scorers towards the top. Like, that is the job of the strikers, to score goals. So yeah, I'm going to reward the guys that score goals. And Jaime Moreno is one of those guys. He's got the 5th most in MLS history. His per 90 is not great, which I'm sure hurt you because you look at per 90 and per appearances, and that's going to immediately kill him.
Of course it is, because anybody can go and put 100 goals in 500 appearances.
Not everybody can even get 500 appearances.
And that's my
guy was able to stay healthy. He was able to keep getting minutes in successful teams, and he was continuously scoring.
No, he didn't. He didn't get minutes.
Why are we knocking
He didn't get minutes in
being...
successful teams. He didn't play for Metro. He had a successful team right in front of him. He didn't play.
That's why he played for successful teams, because he didn't play for Metro. I don't know why we're knocking guys because they have a lot of minutes. Like, I don't think we should be knocking guys just because they have played a lot of time in this league. Like, I don't think that's a fair comparison to these guys. Whereas, like, so you're looking at this guy's entire career. We're probably looking at potentially like the starting period where he's kind of getting started and getting minutes and probably not getting a lot of goals, and the end period where it's the same thing again. He's dwindling down, he's getting minutes, but he's probably not getting a lot of goals. Versus a Giovinco who's coming in his prime. We see him for 3 prime seasons, and then he dips. So of course his numbers are going to look great because
great.
We don't have all those other periods.
Let's do this, and let's go ahead and just make a list of everybody who's played the most minutes, regardless of how many games. I'm putting Sasha Victorine as number 10 on my top 10 because he's got 242 appearances.
You were just looking for an excuse to bring in Sasha Victorine.
20,000 minutes, 20,000. We have to give him credit for playing that long. That's unbelievable, Connor. Let's just throw him in there because
that is not the only criteria.
Forget about the impact over that much time. Forget about it because we don't need it. But just the fact that he played that much, let's not even worry about what he did during the time. Let's just put him in because he played.
That's not my list. That's what I've been explaining this entire time, but you're just ignoring that fact because all you want to do is look at the per 90 and the per appearances. I'm surprised you don't have Zlatan number 1 because he is the best per 90 goal scorer in MLS history. So
you don't know who I have number 1.
I don't. You're right. The fact that you don't have Josef Martinez on your list is disgusting, but that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, Jaime has 26,000 minutes in the league for good reason. He was a great goal scorer. He's going to consistently get minutes. 12 playoff goals was like number 4 on this list of strikers in terms of playoff goals. The guy was clutch. He got clutch goals. 70 assists for a striker. That's outrageous. Like, he's the only one even in the ballpark of Landon Donovan. And like you said, Landon played in so many different positions. Of course, he's going to be in the market for more assists in that regard. And Jaime still got 70 assists. And Jaime was not a winger. As far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, Jaime was not a winger. He was a striker, and 70 assists is crazy. Again, I didn't weight assists super heavily because I think the job of the goal scorer is primarily to score goals. But I think that helped him as well. No time outside of MLS since he was there. His individual awards were very good. 1 Golden Boot and 5 MLS Best 11s, 4 MLS All-Stars. His team awards were outrageous. This guy has won so many team awards, and he had a huge part in winning a lot of those awards. 4 MLS Cups, 4 Supporter Shields, 2 U.S. Open Cups, and a CONCACAF Champions Cup. That's outrageous. That easily got him full points for me in the team awards category. And he was a huge part in winning a lot of those awards. 75 national team appearances was about middle of the pack, so he got about average points there. But what he was able to accomplish in team awards, the fact that he was able to score so many goals, and he did it in the clutch moments with 12 playoff goals, was a huge factor in me putting him high up in the list. We talk about history all the time, and his name comes up so often because he
negatively.
Was really,
his
really
name
good.
comes up negatively.
It does not come. Only one episode was negatively, and it was the Rebel episode.
Here's how I'm going to counteract everything that you just said. 34% of his goals came from the penalty spot. Game over. I will not have a pen merchant top 2 strikers of all time. I won't have it. I'm not going to sit here and listen to it. Like, that is, and actually, I'm going to have to go back on that statement, but I will not have a DC United pen merchant top 2 of all time. And the reason I have
so you have a different pen merchant top 2 all time.
I have to go back on that is because at number 2, I told you are out of your mind. The number 2 striker in MLS history is Josef freaking Martinez. The fact that you don't have him higher than you did is purely criminal. The second best goals per 90, as you mentioned, over the entirety of his career, which he's been here since Atlanta started. The 4th best goals per appearance. He's got average numbers in the playoffs, but his awards were great. Josef Martinez, 1 MVP, 1 Golden Boot, 3 All-Star games. And again, in a career where he had to miss a year and realistically in, I'd say, 2 years because of a massive injury. He missed it and then he didn't really come back from it. And then he was sitting behind other strikers. He wasn't getting a lot of time. Now he's in Montreal. You're right. He has another ability, but the speed at which he took over this league, the impact that he made, yes, in a great team. The fact that you don't think he's at least top 5 is unbelievable. That is criminal behavior out of you. And I am really I am about to call you an Orlando fan. Like, that's where you're about to be. Like, you are unbelievable. Like, and again, this just passes the vibe test to speak into your new lingo. Like, watching him play, he was the single most dominant player I've seen in forever, and he kept it up for years. I'm not sure the exact numbers, but I'm fairly certain he was the fastest to 100 or very close to it. His goals, like I said, his goals per 90, there's only one person who did better than him, and that's Stern John, who did it in 2 seasons. His per 90 numbers, 0.78. Are we kidding with that number? Over what? When they start over 6, 7 years? That's unbelievable. I couldn't put him any higher because of some of the other things I'm going to talk about here, mainly his playoff contributions. But goodness me, those sort of numbers, that's a one and done or 2 and done guy. Not a 7 years going to do it forever type of guy. Josef Martinez, unbelievable player, unbelievable talent, 100% should be in the top 2.
Listen, if we're just, is this conversation talking about the most talented strikers, or are we talking about the best strikers?
Define it. What does the best mean to you?
This is what we should define to begin with.
No, because if we defined it that way, we'd have the same list. And you're out here. I don't want to have the same list. It'd be boring.
That's fine, but then you can't come at me for having him at 7 because
I absolutely will come at you
because
what's the difference? What does the best mean to you? Oh, they just score the most goals. Great. Gyasi Zardes at number 4.
That's that's the only thing I look at.
Kei Kamara at number 2 because he's going to pass Landon here in a second. What are we doing? What are we doing?
Listen, I think Josef has the potential to easily jump into that point, but I just don't think he's had enough time in the league yet to get there. He exploded in the first 3 seasons, and since then has just not been the same. And I know it was the injury that really hurt him, but he just has not been that same Josef. He was insane those first 3 seasons. If he did that across 5 seasons, he's easily on track to be the best goal scorer of all time in MLS. And he's got good awards. He checks a lot of boxes, but there were just some boxes for me that he just didn't check off. The fact that he just hasn't been here, or he hasn't had the minutes, I should say, since he's been here, because he's been here for 7 seasons now, but he's been hurt a lot of the time. And 5 playoff goals.
So now we're hurting people for being hurt? We're taking away points from
No,
it's not hurt?
It's not hurting people for being hurt, but it's just these guys that stay healthy and continue to score goals. Why am I gonna knock them because other guys are getting hurt?
So it's Nashville. It's
a testament
fault.
to these guys who are able to stay healthy.
It's Nashville's fault for having turf and hurting Josef and not letting him be a top 5 striker.
Yes, they ruined him.
I'm gonna call him up and let him know that you said that.
Go ahead. Yeah, I mean, come on. Obviously, I love Josef, and his goals per 90 is insane. And I look at him compared to a guy like Robbie Keane, right, who's very similar in a lot of regards. But Robbie Keane was more clutch in the playoffs. Robbie Keane had more assists. Robbie Keane had slightly better individual awards. And then he had a lot better team awards. Josef just hasn't won a lot in the team awards regard. And those were things that just ended up knocking him a little lower on my list. Don't get me wrong. In terms of goals and goals per 90, goals per 90, he'd be number 1 on my list, right? If that was my number 1 key metric, he'd be number 1 on my list. But it's not the only thing I looked at in terms of just sheer number of goals and goals per 90 and playoff goals. There were other things that knocked him down a bit more for me. I just don't think he's there yet.
So what you're telling me is the reason Josef isn't a top 5 striker is because Atlanta are mid and don't win a lot of things. Got it. Thank you for clarifying that.
I wish I could say it was wrong. I wish we were able to win more things, but unfortunately we didn't somehow.
Well, I can already tell where your number one is going, and we've had that conversation already, but I'll go ahead and let you say it.
Yes, my number one is Landon Donovan. And again, that's coming down to the debate on where you want to classify him at what position. We spoke about before that we said we were going to go based off of what their main position was on transfer market, and that for Landon was at the striker spot. So I included him on the list, and I looked at his numbers in totality because we're going to classify him as one thing, and that's what we're going to look at. And it was in that regard, it was unquestionably Landon Donovan. And I'm sure you wouldn't disagree with that if that were the case. Like
Actually,
the guy, you would disagree with that?
his per 90 numbers dragged him down into honorable
Oh my
mentions for me.
God, the per 90 numbers. This is the only thing this guy cares about is the per 90 numbers.
Brother,
Not the fact
anybody
that the
can
guy
do it
has
over 400 games.
146 goals, second of all time at this moment. 24 playoff goals is outrageous. The dude is insanely clutch. 109 assists, which is, again, probably a product of where he was playing, but 109 assists is still outrageous. I'm sure a number of those assists were also from the striker spot. The guy got to move to Bayern Munich, Everton, and Club Leon. Like, that's huge. That's massive. Again, that's the whole Clint Dempsey conversation. I didn't see fees attached with it, so I didn't give him any points for fees. He unquestionably had the best individual awards on this list. 1 Golden Boot, 7-time best 11, an MVP, and 13 All-Star appearances. Just, like, not even close. Nobody else is in the conversation. And team awards was insane, too. 6 MLS Cups, 2 Supporter Shield, 1 US Open Cup, and then to top it all off, the favorite statistic, 157 national team appearances. He was far and away the best player I had on my list.
Yeah, it's really easy to win a bunch of team awards when the league bends the rules for you to do it. Like
that's a whole separate debate.
But it's not right. If you're going to use it as a metric to weight players and their impact, it's a conversation, right? Like
all
that's
right,
not something like, we'll
okay. So what? Take away the 3 cups from the Galaxy era.
It puts him down to 2 cups and a shield.
He still has 3 cups, 3 cups and a shield, I think.
What's his 3rd cup? He had 2 with San Jose and a shield. And again, you're sitting here like, oh my God, look at all the impact that he had.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I'm gonna cut you off for a sec. 4 MLS Cups with the Galaxy, 2 with San Jose. He won 1 in 2005 with the Galaxy.
Okay, I'll give you the 2005 one. That's fine. But you're gonna sit here and again, if we took this data straight from WhoScored.com and just filtered it to only as a striker, he doesn't even. I don't think he's. I believe he will probably sniff honorable mentions. I don't think he gets top 10.
But that's so unfair to him because then
how we're talking
it's going to hurt him
strikers.
in every. It's going to hurt him in every position. Like Landon Donovan is arguably the greatest player to ever play in this league, and yet if you go based on a positional basis, he will like never be at the top of the list. Like you could say,
I don't disagree with that, by the way. But we're not talking about the best player, the best goal scorer, the most influential player. We're talking about pure strikers. So if I took in, so let me put it this way, right? If I took Vinicius Jr., a pure out and out winger, and I played him at striker for half a season, and then all the rest of the time he's playing out on the wing, just because he played at striker for half of that season and has some stats from there, are we now just completely taking him out of the equation? Because and let's make it even more interesting. Every a third of every other year he's playing there, so his numbers are 2/3 to a third striker to wide player. But the majority of his stuff comes from wide player. Are we still talking about him as a striker? Probably not. You can sit here and talk about him
as a winger, and then you just look at everything together.
No, but you don't. That's the
point. You would. You're not like if you're talking about Cristiano Ronaldo, right? You're not talking about like, oh, here are his numbers only as a winger. Like that's what we're gonna look at. Like, oh, who's the best like goal scorer as a striker? We're not just gonna like disregard. Like if you're gonna classify him as a striker, you're looking at his full numbers. You're not like, oh, this is how many he scored when he was playing as a striker. It'd be so hard to define that because you can move around during the game too. So it would be like impossible to narrow down exactly how many goals you scored as a striker, how many goals you scored as a winger. Like the best you can do is just put a label on them and then just look at their full statistics.
What I'll tell you is, at the very least, we have the same team for our number one. And
I can imagine who you have at number one.
For me, it's Robbie Keane. Second most goals per appearance, fourth most goals per 90, over a decent amount of time, right? We can agree that he had a good amount of time here where that's not super heavily weighted. Third most playoff assists, eighth most playoff goals, and then his awards again were what kind of bumped him up. For me, Robbie Keane, 1 MVP, 3 All-Star games. Again, not super out of this world, but his impact when he was on the field is elite goal scoring ability, and I will classify it as elite, as well as his clutchness in the playoffs has him as the number one striker to me in league history. If you want to argue about Landon being a striker and everything counting, I would have that conversation. But to me,
it's not a conversation.
I'd have the conversation. I would.
It's not a conversation.
It is it's absolutely a conversation, because you went and weighted a whole bunch of other things that you shouldn't have weighted. But anyways, the impact of Robbie Keane during clutch moments and his ability to turn a team around. Now, and I might have to fact check this, but to my understanding, they had Donovan and Beckham before they had Keane, and they barely snuck into the playoffs. So they didn't win that year. Then Keane came along and turned the team around to a championship team. That sort of impact is the important part. So, like I said, you can talk about your right winger, cosplaying as a striker every couple of games, and how he wants to be an elite whatever. But Robbie Keane is the best pure out and out number 9 this league's ever seen over a significant amount of time. Because I can also hear conversations like, oh, Zlatan was the most impactful in his time here. Maybe, right? Starting John was most impactful in his time here. Maybe, right? I'd hear that conversation. If we want to do another episode of top 10 most impactful strikers, forget about time and just look at numbers, I'd have that conversation. This whole list would change. But
it's just going to be a per 90 conversation. That's all it's going to be. Who had the highest per 90 numbers? Okay.
Well, not necessarily, because I wouldn't put Zlatan at 1 or even Stern John at 1, because not only did they had good per 90 numbers, what did they do with it? They just scored a bunch of goals and missed the playoffs, and then had, in Zlatan's case, had his...
So per 90 plus playoff goals. That's all it's going to matter.
No.
I mean, that's all you really cared about this time around.
No.
Anyway, so.
Well, that's because that's all I had available to me. I was working with what I had. I had a whole bunch of other stats that I use in MLS best statistical team of the season. And they didn't pop up because nobody tracks data back to MLS's 1.0.
This was a mess of an episode again. We were on like literally full, like, I understand we want to have differing things, so we have differing opinions and stuff, but we were on fully different wavelengths on this one. We were so disconnected. But
here's the thing, like, you always try to find the same criteria, but these are subjective fields, right? This isn't like the best goal scorer in MLS, per 90, right? This is what we think is the best. So if I weight playoff appearances and per 90 more than you weight international and transfers and stuff, that's fine. And that's what the conversation's about. Now, one of us can be right, the other one can be you. But like, that's what this is about.
No, I want us to weight things differently, but the huge debate has been over positions for Landon Donovan, which I think, like, you putting Wando at 10 versus me putting Wando at 3, totally fine. Like, that's just down to criteria. But the debate on Landon really just came down to whether or not he should be included, like, in the population, or how he should be included in the population, which is something that I think is something that I would want to, like, iron out ahead of time, because I want us to have different criteria, but, like, pick from the same population. That's where we ran into issues.
Next time I'll make it really easy for you. I'll give you a nice list of 30 players that I picked from, and you can pick from them, and we'll make it all nice and neat.
That's fine with me.
That's not happening, because that's not happening. Anyways, make sure
it was an entertaining episode. That's to say the least.
I sure hope so. Well, let us know if you enjoyed it in the comments below. We appreciate you guys for listening and following along. We missed top 10s. I think this was a lot of fun. And we've got a whole bunch more to talk about. So make sure you stick around and subscribe for that. Follow us on any podcast platform, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, all the good ones. You can go to our website or our link tree to find all of those links anyway, so you don't need to go searching around for them. And then follow us on social media, so Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. We're really big in those areas and love to post all that content. So Hope to see you guys there really soon. And thanks again for listening. And we will see you next time on the next episode, the Designated Players, an MLS podcast.